All right, logos. Logos tends to be the most confusing part for students when it comes to persuasion. So I'm going to attempt to really simplify this. Instead of going into talking about logic and the basic of arguments and fallacies, I'll talk about some really basic fallacies of reasoning. But I'm going to try to focus on this really basic so you understand what you need to know to complete the assignments and the speeches for this unit. So logos is our evidence and our reasoning in persuasion. This is where really the bulk of your argument comes from, because you have your ethos, but that can only get you so far. You have your pathos, your emotional appeals, but as we mentioned, moderation. Where's the rest of your argument going to come from? Your logos, your evidence, and your reasoning from that evidence, and your claims. So, when we look at logos, you want to make sure that in order to have good logos, in order to create a good, solid argument here, it's going to want to be logical, hence logos, logical. And you're going to want to have good, credible evidence to back that up. So how do you know if your evidence is credible? Run the CRAP test that we talked about earlier. Run that on your sources. So most of the research that you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing research and you're going to be presenting that as evidence here. It's going to be research-based. Most of it is not going to be your own personal experiences. You can use your own personal experiences as logos. That is certainly a possibility, but it's a little bit less, I guess I would say, credible and believable than when you have cited sources. So that's one aspect. Cite your sources. Make sure that the sources that you're using, the evidence that you're using, is evidence that's going to back up your argument or help create your argument. So really when we look at logos, we're thinking about a couple different things. We're going to list a couple pieces of evidence, and then we're going to create a conclusion from that evidence. And all that needs to support our claim or our main argument. So let's, for example, talk about drinking water, okay? So we're going to come back and say that everyone should drink eight glasses of water per day. I'm going to try to convince you of that, okay? Why everyone should drink 8-ounce glasses of water per day. I'm about to make up some statistics. I'm about to make up some evidence. So just disclaimer there, this is not necessarily true. I'm just making this up for example purposes. So I'm going to make that claim that everyone should have 8-ounce glasses of water per day. Now I'm going to provide some evidence to back that up. The evidence needs to be relevant to that claim. So I wouldn't want to say something like, water is important because if there's a drought, nobody will have anything to drink. Well, that doesn't really support my argument that I need to be drinking 8-ounce glasses of water. What does is saying something like body temperature is regulated by water, and your body is made up of 70% water. Those two facts are helping me kind of create that argument. If I state a third fact in there of when you feel thirsty, you've already lost 1% of the water in your body. So now I've made those three pieces of evidence. Now I can really create a conclusion that's going to tie that evidence back to my main argument as to why you should be drinking 8-ounce glasses of water per day. So I can say, as you can see, water is important. Note I made a judgment there by saying it's important. I can make that claim because I have evidence to back that up. Water is important for your health and your temperature regulation. You should be drinking water throughout the day to prevent thirst because once you are thirsty, you've already lost 1% of your bodily water. There, I'm taking that evidence and creating some sort of conclusion from that evidence to really create my argument. Again, this is a really basic example. There are a lot of flaws and fallacies and things you can do. Things you can do with your reasoning. Your reasoning is really how you make sense of the evidence that you see. So some examples of fallacies. Probably the biggest one is slippery slope, and this is one that I see often, and you see this a lot in the news too. So it's people making an argument of something like, well, if we allow homosexual unions, pretty soon everybody will be allowed to marry their pets. Okay, that's a slippery slope. That slippery slope assumes that the one action of allowing homosexual unions means we're going to be able to get married to our pets. No, there's not really a connection there. That's a slippery slope. We're just exaggerating, taking something totally out of context there. There's no evidence to back that up. Thus, that's a fallacy. It's not a fallacy. Your reasoning is sound if you have solid evidence that helps support that conclusion that you created that also supports your claim. So when you can kind of tie it all together, and that's what you do with that conclusion, you're showing me that that reasoning that you have and the evidence that you have is sound. So I hope that tries to clarify this a little bit. Again, I know this can be very complex, so I really tried to simplify it here. So as you're going through and thinking about reasoning, just think about having solid evidence that supports your claim that you can create a conclusion from that ties that evidence back to your claim.